Hello, let's look at another chapter of To Kill a Mockingbird. This is chapter 29, and it is after the attack. And in this chapter, we are sorting out what happened during the attack. Everyone is stationed in Jem's room. Sheriff Tate wants Scout to tell what happened, of course. And Aunt Alexandria is there. She kind of excuses herself. And she doesn't want to be in there. She wants everyone to move out to the living room. And at one point, she takes the blame, right? This is my fault. She knew it was going to happen. Remember a couple chapters ago, she had this premonition. She felt someone step on her grave. And she'd known a while that Bob Ewell was a bad person and thought something was going to happen. She didn't do anything to stop it. So she takes the blame. The sheriff kind of assuages her a little bit and lets her know that it's not your fault. He's just a bad person. And then we get into Scout's tale, right? The sheriff just asks Scout, can you tell us what happened? And he questions her along the way. And so she tells the story of how Cecil had scared her. They thought he was the one following. They yelled at Cecil. There was even talk of, well, Atticus, did you hear them yelling? And he didn't hear the radio. Probably everybody else in the street heard the radio. And we had an interesting statement. Wonder if any of the neighbors heard. Well, at the end of the chapter, we find out which neighbor had helped, and this neighbor is the one that probably heard. His house, of course, was the closest to the attack. We see Scout's costume was crushed to a pulp, right? It was this big, shapely ham, and now it's just mangled. And in it being mangled, the sheriff looks at it and discovers this costume probably saved her life, right? He pointed out an area on there that was bright, shiny metal on the chicken wire. And basically what happened is another piece of metal, a knife, scraped against that as the attacker tried to stab her. Okay, so this costume saved her life. We had some talk about Bob Ewell. He's a mean person, the sheriff had said. He got all liquored up and became brave enough to kill children. And Scout had this memory that Bob Ewell was going to get Atticus if that's the last thing he ever did. And this was the last thing he had done. And it almost worked. He almost got to Atticus by killing his children. And the sheriff said something interesting. Some men you gotta shoot, right? They're just mean and evil, and even shooting them isn't worth the bullet. Okay? And Bob Ewell was one of these people. He was racist to no end. He was responsible for Tom Robinson's death. He tormented people. He threatened others. He's just your classic, stereotypical bad person who thought everybody was picking on him. He had the guts to confront a colored woman. He was brave enough to confront the judge when he thought the judge was out. Do you think he would have the guts to confront Atticus? See, Atticus thought that Bob Ewell would come to him, not anyone else. And that wasn't the way Bob Ewell worked. That was the sheriff's explanation. I don't like violence, but looking back on this book, Bob Ewell caused so much misery and heartache in this whole community. Anyway, Scout goes back to talking about the attack. She mentions they knew they were under the tree because it was colder, and the sheriff was impressed by this, wanted to make Jem a deputy, so to speak. And she goes on to recount the attack on page 269 and 270. And it's just broken sentences. Right? He was grabbing me, matched my costume, I ducked to the ground, heard tussling. They were bamming against a tree trunk, sounded like Jem. Jem found me. He pulled me up. Then someone, Ewell, yanked him down, I reckon, tussled some more, and there was this funny noise. Yeah, remember that funny noise from the very first chapter of the very first sentence of this book. When he was nearly 13, my brother Jem got his arm badly broken at the elbow, and that was that crunching sound. We had more fighting. We heard Jem's arm. Someone came to help. Okay, this helper is not named yet, but someone came to help, and Scout's like, I thought Atticus come to help since we got wore out. And the sheriff asked, who was it? Well, there he is, Mr. Tate. He can tell you his name. It's the person standing up against the wall in the room. His skin is very white. He has pale hands, a pale face. He has a shirt that's ripped. His pants, his khakis, are dirt covered because he was fighting around against Bob Ewell. And Scout realizes then in retelling the story what had happened. And I think then she realizes how much danger she was in. And she breaks down crying and says hello to the person in the corner. And that's all this chapter is. Have a great day.